Hello everyone, this will be my guide on the jungle clearing with Ekko as well as the gank paths I usually use. Jungling on gold hungry junglers like Ekko is all about not wasting time, so you can have more resources than the enemy champs and as a result be stronger than them. To reach higher elos you will have to achieve that by impacting the map as well as maintaining an efficient clear path. This perfectly fits Ekko's playstyle because he can definitely use the extra gold from kills to snowball with his incredibly strong item power spikes. A lot of low elo players think that Ekko is not a champ that can get kills in the early game, but that could not be further from the truth. I can't really prove it in this video since I won't show any actual gameplay here, but as you can see in my highest elo account right now, which is in D1, I average around 3 kill participations at 10 minutes. I will be showing you a gameplay video of mine soon where you can see that it's very easy to have an impact with Ekko jungle even in the early game. Before getting into the actual jungle clearing, I have a huge tip for you that will instantly improve your jungle clearing efficiency. Use the Blitz app. This is what pushed me to reach Master Tier last season when I was stuck around D2 for some time before. The reason Blitz is so good for junglers is the fact that it shows you the jungle timers on all camps. With this information you have a much easier time to weigh out the risk versus reward of not clearing the jungle to help your team. It will also help you keep track when your jungle pathing has been a bit awkward, so you might not remember which camp spawn first. In general, it's just a huge help because it's one less thing you have to keep track of in your head when jungling. Also, in my opinion, it's low-key even cheating, because it shows the exact jungle timer of enemy camps as soon as you discover them yourself. The reason this can be very overpowered is that it gives you a lot of information on the enemy jungler's possible location. An example of this that I had actually happen in a game of mine is that I walked up to the enemy raptor camp and saw that it would spawn again in around 2 minutes. Now you should know that jungle camps spawn every 2 minutes and 15 seconds, so this gave me the information that the enemy jungle cleared the camp in the last 15 seconds without me actually being there. This resulted in me invading him at his crux and killing him. This kind of information would be impossible to have without extensions like Blitz. And since I'm not a big YouTuber, you can be sure that this is my genuine opinion on the app and not a sponsorship or anything like that. Alright, so let's get into the full clear path for Ekko. I'm only gonna show the path from red side because it's the more difficult one, since you'll be a lower level at Crux and Raptors. To start it off, I placed the W at 126. This is not hugely important, but it also doesn't cost you anything to do it as early as possible. This will simply ensure that you have it up again for the Crux right away. As you can see, I drop very low, so you might be wondering why I don't smite the red. The reason for that is, if you get a leash in a game you won't drop low, and I want to show you the best simulation of how it would look like in a real game. Now, the Crux clear is where you can lose a lot of time and one that I actually explained wrong in my first video on how to dominate low elo. As you can see, I throw my Q without vision to pull the Crux to me and then place my W so both Crux get stunned. Now I use my smite on the big croc and attack it a few more times so it splits up. The real important part is to already start walking to your raptors when the medium crocs are about to die and just throw a Q back at them. This way you don't waste any time without attacking every small croc. For clearing the raptors, I place my W and attack the closest small raptor to pull them together. As soon as they are stunned, your Q should be off cooldown and you should try to hit all the raptors. Make sure to proc your passive on the big one first, so it goes off cooldown faster, and then try to proc it on as many small ones as possible. Don't worry if you don't get all of them right away, because you will just kill them with your second Q anyways. After clearing all the camps on the side you started on, you should always look to see if there's a gank opportunity somewhere. I would say in around half my games I will go for a level 3 gank on the lane I'm pathing towards. The only real note I have for clearing the wolf camp is to only proc the passive once on the small wolves and to not waste any auto attacks on them afterwards, since they will just die to the burn damage. Also, I didn't mention this, but in general you can see that I always kite the camp in the direction I'm clearing towards, and you should do the same. For clearing the blue buff, I usually jump over the wall with my E and use my Q once on the blue buff alone. After that I will kite it towards the grump and place a W so I stun both of them, and then throw my Q to pull the grump. I always smite the grump, or Crux if it's a blue side start, because then with a leash you should be almost at full HP so you can look to impact the map. Don't worry so much about getting the crab right away. In most games you'll be trading sides with the enemy jungler anyways, so the first crab won't be contested. Also, since the XP got nerfed on the first crab, its value has gone down, so even if you have to give it up, it's not a huge deal. After clearing, you should look for a gank. If there doesn't seem to be any gank possibility on the side you're on, clear the crab and just take a reset and start clearing again, or look for a lane gank. Now I will also explain when I start where and the reasons behind it. When I play red side, I start on red buff 99% of my games. The reason being that most other junglers will also start on their red buff, so you can avoid them on the first crab. Another reason is that you have the potential to get 2 kills on bot lane, which really helps you snowball on Ekko. On blue side I would say it's around 50-50 where I start. Red side clear usually means that you will trade sides again, but it also means that you won't have the potential to get 2 kills on bot and you will weak side your bot lane. This is in my opinion the worst option most of the time, since bot lane usually has a bigger impact on the game than top lane. Choosing where to start really comes down to a huge amount of unpredictable variables, game knowledge and experience, and I'm sure that I don't always make the right choice. I would say in general you should look to path to lanes that have good gank setup and where the enemy laners don't have a lot of disengage. I don't stream very often on Twitch right now, but if you ever catch me live then I will make sure to explain the reasons for my pathing. Okay, so let's get into the gank paths. I will divide them into gank paths possible without Rocketbelt and ones that are possible with Rocketbelt. Ganking in general is obviously much easier with Rocketbelt since it increases your range by a lot, but some engage angles are really only possible if you have it completed. This is one of the biggest reasons you should never ever go Nashor's before Rocketbelt. And another general ganking rule for Ekko is to always place the W before walking into the enemy's vision, since then they won't see the animation and have less time to react. I will go over the gank path systematically from top to bottom. Since the map is mirrored, I won't explain every gank path for both sides, since they're basically the same, just with top and bot swapped, but I will give some extra info on some small differences. Now on blue side your gank options for top are as follows. My favorite that works the most, even in higher elos, is the lane gank. The reason I like it so much is the fact that the enemy laner doesn't have to overextend for it to work and you can kind of force it onto them. You can either do it after clearing your jungle, or if you want to catch the enemy off guard with a weird timing, you can even do it when coming out of the base. Just make sure the minions don't spot you, so keep looking at the waves. You can usually even tell your teammates to bait the enemy into fighting them as well, because they will have a false sense of security since they are not overextending. Another big reason I find this gank path to be so good is the fact that top laners will almost always choose to ward either the river or the tri-brush, so they won't have any wards left for the lane brush. The most basic option is to go through the river if the enemy doesn't have vision. The only time this pathing will work, however, is if the enemy is overextended without vision, or your gank setup is very good / the enemy has very bad mobility and no flash. Examples for good gank setups would be champions like Camille or Renekton that can help you hit your W. If the blast cone is up, the chance of the gank being successful increases a lot even if the enemy has vision, since you won't be spotted walking through the river. I basically never go through the tri-brush from the river unless I'm diving the enemy, because there is a very high chance that you'll be spotted by a ward in the river or tri-brush. Also, it's so close to the tower that unless the enemy is massively overextended without vision, you usually won't kill them fast enough if you're not planning to dive. However, there is a nice way to gank top lane through the tri-brush if you know the river is warded, and that is to E over the Rift Herald wall. This will for sure surprise the enemy top laner, since they will feel safe with their vision in the river. Just make sure to ping your E cooldown so your top laner doesn't engage too early. Alright, so let's talk about the mid gank opportunities. To be honest, mid lane is probably my least ganked lane with Ekko, especially before I get my Rocketbelt, since it's just too short to get more than summoner spells most of the time. The only time I really gank mid a lot is if I have champs with great gank setups, such as Malzahar or Galio. There are also some champs that I usually choose to ignore when the enemy mid plays them, and those are mostly champions like LeBlanc or Ahri that just have too much mobility to reliably gank. You can still look to gank them, but if you do, make sure to wait until they have used their mobility spell. Now for ganking mid, you always have the option to simply go through the mid brushes and engage on the enemy if they're overextended, but make sure to use your sweeper on the way there to see if you're being spotted. Another option you have is to go into the lane from behind. This usually has a higher success rate, but at the same time it costs you a bit more time and it is likelier that you will be spotted by a ward. For going in behind to gank, you should be aware of where to path. As you can see, a ward in the mid lane brush doesn't spot you if you hug the wall, so definitely abuse this if you're trying to gank mid. I usually never gank from behind the bigger wall for the fact that there is a very high chance you will get spotted from some kind of ward in any of the brushes. The best option to gank mid for Ekko is to dive a low HP target under their tower, by going into the raptor camp and hugging the wall. Then you place a W onto the enemy and jump over to stun them. Just make sure the enemies are low enough to be killed and you preferably have a laner that can CC them as well. Alright, so ganking bot lane is similar to ganking top lane in some ways since it's mostly just a mirrored lane. However, now you have the tri-brush to walk through on blue side, which is probably the most obvious gank option, but definitely not the best. Lane ganking is also a bit more difficult in bot lane in general since there are 2 champions available to place wards. But you can still easily lane gank bot lane since most bot laners won't place their wards in the first 2 brushes. Just make sure to stay away from the third one. As I said, the tri-brush gank path is the most basic one, but nonetheless it definitely works if the enemy is overextended and you have good gank setup. Basically the same gank path as with the Herald Pit can of course also be done with the Dragon Pit. So if you know the enemy has vision in the tri-brush, I just E over the Dragon Pit and walk down the river. This is better than simply going through the river from above the Dragon Pit, since the probability that you will be spotted in the path is much higher. Just as a side note, I use this path much more often than the Rift Herald one. Alright, so these are all the gank paths on blue side. On red side is literally the same, just mirrored. The only note I have is that bot lane ganks through the river on red side are a bit more difficult usually. The reason being that there is a high chance that it is warded and 2 champs usually have an easier time escaping than one when they are overextending. Now this might seem obvious to you since you have watched the video, but going over the Drake Pit wall when you know the enemies have vision in the river on red side is something basically nobody ever expects. This gank path is definitely more time consuming, but it's worth if you see that the enemies have walked into the river to place a ward. Now I will quickly go over the extra engage angles Rocketbelt enables for Ekko. On the blue side top lane you can easily engage onto an enemy that is pushing the tower by placing your W slightly behind them and then using your E to dash over the wall and the Rocketbelt to quickly close the distance and stun the enemy. You can do the same thing on the red side bot lane, of course. I actually killed the enemy top laner this way in one of my most recent games, so here's a clip of that. Mid ganks through the Raptor Pit are also much easier to pull off since you have a bigger range and can get into your W faster. Oftentimes when my mid laner roams and the enemy mid is pushing the tower, I will engage on them alone with this combo, and it's not even that rare to get sums or a kill this way. Alright, this is it from my guide on the jungle clearing and gank paths with Ekko. If you enjoyed the video and feel like you learned something, consider subscribing and leaving a like. If you have any more questions, don't be afraid to ask and I will try to answer them. Also, if you're interested in seeing how I play, there will be a video coming soon where I go over one of my games I played in high elo. But in the meantime, you might catch me live on twitch.tv/ekkoliner, and with that, I wish you a great day, my fellow Ekko enjoyers.